Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, this is one of those builds where it's like, why exactly did I try and build this? Anyway, basically, where I got to with the Iron Mass build is, it's not good. It's just not, like, a buffed up enough item to justify playing over all the skills that exist in the game. Minions are just like, in particular skeletons, are just not very good compared to other skills. And I guess, you know, off the back of, I guess, changes over the last however many leagues or whatnot, minions just really haven't had much luck sort of excelling. And, you know, I'm just basically searching up how many people are playing, you know, summon skeletons right now. And, like, there is definitely a place for them to be played from what we can see on screen here. But, like, the EHPs and DPSs and whatever are just totally out there and bizarre. Like, yeah, they could work, but it looks like Zoom answers are pretty much the way to go, and then stacking poison procs. So, like, this is a poison build would probably be quite a good build, in particular with Surveillant. But, basically where I got to was Iron Mass is just not that good of a skill. And in fact, if we look up Iron Mass as a bit of an example here, Iron Mass, 2%. Yeah, like, this is the total accumulation of players that are using Iron Mass. So, like, there are really cool items in the game that could be a lot cooler if they buff them up a little bit, in particular for minion use, but yeah, I don't see there being much purpose in playing Iron Mass builds. I found out the hard way anyway, so yeah, let's talk about the build and I'll show you a bit of gameplay and footage. So we'll do a map and basically you can have a look and see how it plays through a T16, and like I got it working in T16s, it just doesn't work very well. Damage per minion is like 378,000 per minion, which is not very good. Like, for a T16 you want like 1.8 to 2 mil per minion, something like that. It just isn't outputting the damage that it needs. And the other big problem with the Iron Mass configuration is you have to hit the enemy. So the best way I figured to do this is Smite and Val Smite, but it's clunky as hell, it's not a lot of fun. Anyway, let's run a map, I'll show you what it looks like, and then we can talk about the build. I'm still going to walk through it because I put it together and there might be someone a lot smarter than me that can figure out how to make this a viable build. I did get this to level 88 for the Iron Mass Skeleton Summoner, and I'm probably not going to push it any further, so definitely open to suggestions on what you would want to see with the Marauder class. If there's any other cool builds you want me to have a look at. There's definitely a few others I want to look at, but for the next few weeks we'll probably just do a bit of currency farming. Anyway, let's have a look at a map and I'll show you how it plays. Okay, so first thing, I really don't know what you would use this build to farm for, or farm with. And we just got to get past my GPU and my connection. So basically, like, the build works overall, as we can see here. It sort of does do the job. It relies pretty heavily on being carried by Progenesis, which is definitely not something I like in any of my builds. So the other thing too is I don't have a movements ability in this too. Basically, you want to hit your Val Smite constantly as you're playing through, and the reason why we use Val Smite is so we don't have to, like, go up to an enemy and clap the enemy, because that's a good way to die. And as you can see, even with Progenesis, it's just defensive. Defenses are pretty good, actually. It's just high risk because your damage output just isn't keeping up. There are some other issues that I ran into with the build, such as, like, enemies that just totally pursue over the top. You can't play Ultimatum with it. I tried. It's a little disappointing. But, like, as far as builds go, it's definitely not the worst build I've ever played. It's just not a very good build. Actually, this is a bit annoying because, like, the more map mods you play, this is actually doing pretty well, but I guess there's not a lot of mods on this. So basically, like, there we go, we get to the end of the map. The other thing, like, don't need to worry too much about the, about minion death or spectre deaths and stuff like that. And then you get to the boss room, and it'll actually take down T16s pretty okay. So, like... yeah, see? There we go, and there's that random death that you get, which makes it a build that I don't like. Anyway, let's talk about the build and break it down, and the reasons why it's not really worth looking at if you were looking at trying to get Iron Mass to work. Okay, so the idea behind this build initially, void of, I guess, the commentary and the introduction and whatnot, was to try and utilize the Iron Mass, right? So basically, what this does is it allows your... So it replaces the weapon that your skeleton minions use with the Iron Mass sword. And then basically from there, if you hit an enemy with the Iron Mass, then basically your skeletons get Unholy Might and well, they get Unholy Might permanently. It's like permanent uptime. But they also proc triple damage, right? So Unholy Might converts all your damage from your minions to chaos damage. So theoretically, it should be pretty good. In fact, it probably does or could work really well with Eternal Damnation, but I hadn't really tried it. So initially, when I tried to put this build together, I did try to make it a cast when stun build, but because the defenses just weren't there, without running like shields and stuff like that, it doesn't feel anything like my primary cast when stun build that I used to delve with, right? So that basically ruled that out. The other problem with trying to run this as cast when stun was you would then recast skeletons, because you only have a cap of 10 skeletons as it is, and like even if you juice it like 10 to 12, but basically then, yeah, you would basically just cap out of your skeletons and then just respawn the skeletons over the top of the skeletons. So that would occur so quickly that you couldn't actually hit enemies, which is problematic, right? But the idea was to automate it so then you could just go up and, like, you know, tap it with smite and then not worry about anything, right? That was the idea. That didn't work. So then we went to selfcast to try and figure out how to make it work with selfcast. And I think, like, I got pretty far. If I was to invest more time and effort into this, and, like, there are things like I'm missing cluster jewel, like a jewel in here. I'm only level 88, so theoretically 7 more points could actually swing a fair bit more damage into the build or defense and whatnot. So, like, it could potentially go somewhere, but the problem is I got the T16. I don't find it very fun, number one. I don't like the idea that I have to run a Progenesis to make it sustainable. And, yeah, it just feels off. It's hard to explain. But, yeah, anyway, that's basically the whole concept of the build, right? And then basically with the Iron Mass, we then double up with Elemental Equilibrium. And I spent, like, an okay amount of currency on this. I think I spent, like, maybe 2 div, 3 div, something like that. All up so far, I think I put somewhere in the vicinity of maybe, like, I don't know, 10, 15, maybe 18 div into the build. And I just couldn't spin this in a direction that could make it work. The other problem with the build that I found was that I just don't know what you would farm with it. So, like, it's a build without a purpose, if that makes sense. Like, it's not particularly good for bossing. Like, it could be if you switched out Melee Splash for something else, right? But even then, like, elemental damage, increased elemental damage. But even then, I don't even know what you would play this build for. Which is something that, as I was leveling, I was like, why am I even leveling this? Like, can I delve with it? No. Can I ritual with it? A ritual's okay. Can I play ultimatum with it? No. Can it do, like, blight? Yeah, but the damage is a bit bad. And you constantly have to cast, and, like, there are better builds like carrion golems or specters and stuff like that for that. So that's some of the issues I ran into with the build. But yeah, talking through, like, the gearing in the build. So obviously we use, like, Iron Mass. We use a really, like, minion, so +2 minion helm, which isn't very expensive, but this is a pretty decent version. I did have the idea to try and use Wrath, because Wrath sort of specs up the damage with this configuration with Unholy Might. And then we use, like, a stabilizing scepter, so we get Elemental Equilibrium, and then we have Cast when Trigger on that, which was where a little bit of currency went. Boots, I sort of threw around the idea of running like Winds of Legacy of Fury and stuff like that, and then I went, oh, we'll just use Valgreaves in the end. It does use a Darkness and Throne configuration, and we tried to like have it so when you spawn minions constantly, they're doing more damage. Chest piece was just like a really good chest piece, right? So it was relatively cheap, 2,000 armor, which, you know, all the gear I've got on this can be repurposed. And obviously I set it up with a bit of a cast when stun setup, but maybe that's the problem with the build if I took that out and changed that out. But that's where a lot of the defense comes from as well, with Immutable Force and Blood Notch. And then obviously like a really good, you know, Dex ring. So we reserve a lot of HP, right? So this is Blood Magic as well. And then gloves, I crafted these gloves, and they're not the best gloves by any measure, but I get like 40% increased, damage with minions. And then beyond that was just my flask setup, basically off of my cast and stun setup. And then the other idea, like from the pathing tree, was to try and make it Chieftain. Main reason was overcapping, so it did struggle with Uber Labs too, and you could probably do Uber Lab now, but I don't know, it just didn't really feel very good. And then the other thing with like skeleton minions, you want to have like Blessed Rebirth and Life from Death, and so when they constantly like recharge, you get increased regeneration. And when you spawn them, because their HP pool is really low, basically, you know, you don't have to worry about minions dying and stuff like that, because they don't die. And then basically you just stack up like Ghastly Eye Jewels throughout the build as much as you can to push damage up. Now, I tried like Quickening Covenant and Fortress Covenant, but they're just not that good compared to what they used to be. And then, yeah, the next idea was to try and like stack up Minion Pen, Minion Accuracy, Minion Crit where possible to get as much damage and as much HP in the build. And for the most, like the tree works, like it's doing T16s. There's definitely something missing with the build. Potentially this could be a much better Spectre build, or like a Golemancer or something of that nature, but it's just something I haven't really put too much thought into. Now, outside of that, like gem setups, we go from like Petrified Blood, Precision, Purity of Fire with Eternal Blessing. And then we have Smite, Wrath, and we use Generosity. So when we hit Smite, we then like proc that buff onto our allies. If anything, there are mechanics in here that we can reuse for, you know, other various builds that we might consider with minions. But yeah, minion builds just don't feel good. And then basically in the other scepter we have Desecrate, Spirit Offering, and Conductivity. So basically we like try and proc up as much elemental, lightning resist reduction and whatnot as we can. Then in the chest, you know, we got Summon Skeletons. We got it to like level 23, and this is Val Summon Skeletons, by the way. Fresh Meat, which isn't ideal, like we'd want to put that on something else. Actually, no, Fresh Meat's fine. Gives our minions Wake and Fury. And then they do a fair bit of damage off the back of that, and then Awaken minion damage, Awaken melee splash, multi-strike, and volatility, right? So volatility wasn't fully leveled in this either, but it doesn't really make too much of a difference. Then in the gloves we had Vitality, Leap Slam, Summon Stone Golem of Safeguarding, which is one that you use to basically take away or revert damage, or divert damage, from yourself to your golem. And then Feeding Frenzy is how we get Feeding Frenzy into the build. Then in the boots we have Raise Spectre, Minion Life, Meat Shield, and Animate Guardian, right? So then we run like, I just run like Carnage Chieftains and Host Chieftains from Act 7 on Ashen Field. And that's basically the build, right? So, yeah, that's more or less the build. Now, I'll put the POB in the description, as I always do. I had a second POB as well, which I'll put in the description, that just has some attribute issues if you want to work with that. There is another way to play this build on the Chieftain, and it does get a lot more damage, but the problem is you're running Blessing Auras, and that's running the boots that provide Blessing Auras. And I don't really like that, because then it just becomes a button mashing contest, and I wanted to try and make this build relatively automated so you didn't have to, you know, press so many buttons, but I just don't think that's doable with this configuration. But yeah, anyway, that's it for the Iron Mass build. I thought I'd do a video, like, you know, a lot of creators post up videos about their successes, but they don't post videos about where they learn about something, right? So a lot of builds I play in League, like you see like a few that go up every league, but I play like way more builds, and there's tons of, most creators do exactly this. We play like a ton of different builds to see what sticks, and sometimes we get really lucky, sometimes you know, not so lucky, like in this case, and sometimes somewhere in between you find something that's pretty level average. But I'm definitely not against posting up some of the failings, because in every failing, this is how you basically learn Path of Exile. And we now know that Iron Mass sucks. So anyway, if you like this type of video, don't forget to like and sub to the channel. Like, this is probably a bit more on the chin than usual, and I'll leave you with some mapping footage as a bit of a closeout to this video. I don't want to do like a full-blown guide on this or anything like that, because I can't recommend this to anybody. But if you want to try it, everything will be in the description, and maybe you can figure out some mechanics and stuff like that to get it to work. But for now, I'm going to can this build, and we are probably going to farm with the auto bomber for a little bit, and push down and delve, do a video on delve, do some PoE 2 content as well, which I got planned. I really need to get myself together and get on track with that. And yeah, anyway, we'll hop on some Twitch and chill out with everyone. Anyway, until next time, I'll see you guys later, and enjoy the footage.